The Necrological Service in honor of the late Senator Rene G. Espina is hereby declared open.
Please rise for the Lord's Prayer to be sung by the Senate Choir. After the doxology, please remain standing for the singing of the Philippine National Anthem. The Honorable Francisco S. Tatad will now deliver his eulogy.
Mr. Senate President, distinguished members of the Senate, President Estrada, Mrs. Espina, members of the Espina family and clan, my friends. I flew to Cebu on Monday morning as soon as I learned that our dear friend and former colleague, Senator Rene Espina, had passed away. In the evening, I joined his family and friends at Holy Mass in Our Lady of China and Matthew Ricci chapels at the Sacred Heart Church in Cebu City. After Mass, one of his granddaughters, who works for People's TV4, asked me if I could say a few words about her grandfather to his beloved Cebuanos. I knew I would be speaking at the Senate service here today, having been previously asked to do so, but I could not decline the impromptu invitation. This is therefore the second time in 3 days that I'll be talking about our dear departed friend. The youngest of Rene's 3 sons, Eric, Miguel, a former councilor of Cebu and a TV host, and Juan was been a friend to me as I was to his father, remembers that as a boy, he was taught to pray each time before going to bed, that may his father have a long, healthy, fruitful, and happy life. He prayed this prayer every night, and he believes it has been answered. By the 26th of December this year, Rene would have turned 90. It was a well-lived life. Rene was a late arrival to the marriage of his parents, Rafael Espina and Tarcela Ganjonco. His mother had a hard time conceiving and had to beg the Señor Santo Niño de Cebu for a child, with the fervor of a Saint Monica begging the Lord to convert her son Augustine from his errant ways. Just as God did not allow the child of Monica's tears to perish, he did not allow Tarcela's plea to go unanswered. She finally bore a child, and she saw it as a direct answer to her prayers to the child Jesus. So she and her husband named the child for our Lord, Jesus Rene Marino, not simply Rene. In Western practice, they would have simply called him by his first name, Jesus. But for some reason or other, he grew up as simply Rene. He was handsome, bright, and hardworking, and did not mind working at the most menial jobs in the pier to earn his keep. He distinguished himself in his studies, decided to study law at the University of Southern Philippines, and eventually became a lawyer in the year 1955. He came out as one of the bar top-notchers. As a law student, he got involved in the successful campaign to elect Ramon Magsaysay for president. And before RM's fatal flight from Cebu for Manila on March 17, 1957, he asked the newly minted Cebuano lawyer to join his entourage on board with the promise of a possible presidential appointment later. Rene was all excited about the invitation and quickly packed his traveling bag. But his wife, the lovely former Rufinita de Leon Remolio of Negros Occidental, did not want him to go without even saying why. This was the first spat of the married couple. It is like Calpurnia, Caesar's wife, telling the great Caesar not to go to the Roman Forum after she had a bad dream where she saw Caesar's murder. But in this case, Pining did not say anything. Why she did not want Rene to go. She just did not want her to go. But where Calpurnia failed to convince the great Caesar not to go to the forum, Rene's beloved Pining prevailed upon him. He did not go. He packed his bag, but took it back inside the house because his beloved wife did not want him to go. Hours later, they heard that the president's plane was missing. And there, it became very clear that the hand of God intervened. There were great things for Rene. All perished in that presidential flight, as we all know, except for one survivor, our very good friend, this paperman, Nestor Mata, who lived until a great golden age of 92, until April last year. He passed away, April last year. In 1962, President Diosdado Macapagal named Rene chairman of the Social Security Commission. After a couple years, he ran for governor of Cebu and won, got re-elected until 1968. Then President Marcos named him Secretary of Public Works, Transportation, and Communication from 1968 to 1969. Among his more important projects was the first Mactan Bridge, which I used yesterday morning crossing the Mandaue River. On December 30, 1969, Rene was elected senator. One of the most important legislations he authored was the Dangerous Drugs Act of 1972, the first anti-drug legislation in the Philippines. After martial law abolished Congress, Rene became one of President Marcos's advisors and troubleshooters. I was then press secretary, presidential spokesman, and minister of information, and we had some interactions with each other. In 1978, after President Marcos decided to call parliamentary elections, Rene ran for the position of regional assemblyman for Region 7. However, in a completely unexpected upset, the opposition Pusyong Bisaya swept the Region 7 polls, giving the interim Batasang Assembly a legitimate opposition group and denying Rene and his Cebuano colleagues the place they so worthily deserved in the interim legislature. In February 1986, Marcos called a snap election, snap presidential election, at the prompting of the Americans to test his popularity with the people. He won the election, but the opposition rejected its results and Marcos was ousted in a civilian-supported military revolt now known as the EDSA Revolution. Cory Aquino took over as revolutionary president. We tried to work with Cory, but sailed into serious disagreements with her on a number of constitutional and other issues. In 1987, when she called for senatorial elections and announced her 24-man ticket, Rene and I and some colleagues began working closely with Vicente Puyat, the banker, agriculturist son of the late Senate President Hill Puyat, to form the Grand Alliance for Democracy and field a complete opposition senatorial ticket. This included our good friends, Senator Juan Ponce Enrile, whom Cory had filed from the cabinet after he had installed her as revolutionary president, former San Juan mayor, and great movie actor, Joseph Ernesto Estrada, former Senator Arturo Tolentino, Eva Estrada Calao, former Labor Minister Blas Ople, and other political worthies. When the results came, all good candidates were shut out except for Estrada, who landed on the 14th slot, while Enrile was being yo-yoed from number 24 to 25 and back. I led a protest march on EDSA, but after I was tear-gassed in front of Camp Crame, I decided to raise the issue to a higher level. I wrote a paper on the elections in which I said that in a better process, 9 to 10 of the God candidates should have won. I read my paper in Washington, D.C., before a group that included State Department and Pentagon bureaucrats and Senator Jesse Helms, longtime chairman of the U.S. Senate Committee on Foreign Relations. I pointed out in my presentation that our friend John Enrile had petitioned the Supreme Court to intervene in declaring his election because he had already won. But his petition remained frozen and acted upon. After my presentation, Senator Helms said it had become very clear to him that the High Court in the Philippines had become the new rubber stamp of the Cory Aquino administration. This prompted someone from the State Department, whom I had earlier met in Manila, to reproach me for Helms's reaction to my paper. Look at what I've done, she said. That's a very strong statement which is going to affect the relations between our two countries. To which I said, I'm sorry, ma'am, I merely made a presentation. I had no control over people's reactions to it. While I was still in the US, our Supreme Court ruled in favor of John Enrile, making him the nation's 24th new senator. I ended chairing God with Rene as my alternate. In 1992, I was elected to the Senate, while Rene remained a private citizen. Since then, he never left that status. The nation may have lost sight of Espina, but Espina never lost sight of the nation. He remained deeply committed to its purpose, and this occupied his thoughts, his conversations, and his occasional writings on the pages of the Manila Daily Bulletin. He remained a true Christian believer, devoted to his wife, his children, grandchildren, and determined to fight for the culture that has defined this nation for the last 500 years. In the famous story of Anatole France, there once lived a king who did not want to die without knowing what he called the greatest wisdom of the ages. So he sent out his wise men to distant lands in search of that knowledge. But when they came back with donkeys laden with volumes and volumes of their research, he sent them back saying he did not need a new library. All he needed was a single line written on a single page containing the wisdom of the ages. So they resumed their search and came back after a while with a single line written on a single page, which said, "Man is born, suffers, and dies." This is supposed to be the greatest wisdom of the ages. The king smiled and died very, very happy. But he died completely deceived. For that was not the greatest wisdom of the ages. Rather, the greatest wisdom of the ages says, man is born, suffers, dies, and is reborn to eternal life with his Father in heaven. Our friend and brother, Jesus Rene Marino Espina, knew this very well. He lived this truth to the best of his abilities. And there is every hope. There's every reason to hope and believe that in the newly life he has found, he will be living happily with our Father in heaven.
The Honorable Juan Ponce Enrile will now deliver his eulogy.
Mr. Senate President Vicente Sotto, ladies and gentlemen, the earthly remains of former Senator Rene Espina lies inert in his coffin before us. His eyes, his lips are closed for all eternity. We shall never, ever again see his mirthful smile, nor hear his hearty laughter, nor listen to his stentorian voice that rang so often and loudly in the Senate in the past. He will be gone from us forever from now on. The knell of death has caught up with him. What will only remain will be our memory of him. He is on his journey over that mysterious road which, to discover, we all must travel to someday. This morning, my family and I join you all who are gathered here and the entire nation in condoling with the Espina family for the death of Rene and in showing our last respect for a fallen former member of the Senate. The nation lost a true Filipino, a loyal, patriotic, and worthy son of this country. Rene and his wife Pining, their children, their grandchildren are very dear and close to me and to my family. Our friendship and closeness began more than 3 decades ago when he and I, along with 22 other courageous men and women, ran for the Senate in 1987 under the banner of the Grand Alliance for Democracy. Unfortunately and regrettably, he lost in that election, and so did 21 others from our opposition group. Only former President Joseph Estrada and I survived. I too nearly lost in that election because of some hanky-panky that marred the election of 1987. Rene served the country and her people with devotion and loyalty during his younger days. He was administrator of the Social Security system from 1962 to 1963. This was during the time of President Diosdado Macapagal. He was elected also as governor of the province of Cebu from 1963 to 1969. During the time of President Ferdinand Marcos, he was appointed Secretary of Public Works, Transportation and Communication from 1968 to 1969. He served in that capacity while he was also serving as the elected governor of Cebu. And he oversaw the construction and completion of the Mactan Bridge, the first long-span bridge of the country. He was elected Senator of the Republic in the national election of 1969 and served during the 7th Congress from 1970 to 1973. He was the author of Republic Act number 6425, the first anti-drug law of the country. When martial law was declared in 1972 and Congress was dissolved as a consequence, President Ferdinand Marcos designated him as one of his principal advisors. Rene, as a friend, one cannot ask for more. He was kind, he was considerate, and he was fair. He was a real gentleman. Of all the more than 30 years that I've known him as a friend, I never heard him curse or say anything unkind against anyone. He was an honorable man. Now, he will be gone. We shall never see him again. Death has taken him away from us. He will find his final resting place in the kingdom of our Lord in heaven. But for us, the living, whom he will leave behind, we will always feel the pain of his departure. We will long for him deeply in different ways. We shall miss him as a husband, as a father, as a grandfather, as a brother, as a relative, as a friend. While we accept his inevitable absence from now on, we shall always regard him as still with us and as a part of us. For like what the poet John Donne said, no man is an island entire of itself. Every man is a piece of the continent, a part of the main. If a cloud be washed away by the sea, Europe is the less, as well as if a promontory were. as well as if a manner of thy friends or of thy own were. Any man's death diminishes me, because I'm involved in mankind, and therefore never sent to know for whom the bell tolls. It tolls for thee. Farewell, farewell, dear friend Rene. We shall meet again, we shall smile. If not, this parting is well made.
The Honorable Imee R. Marcos will now deliver her eulogy.
Yes, my Senate President, His Excellency President Arab, my esteemed colleagues, Tito Johnny, Kit, the Espina family, friends, good morning. I don't know when my father met Tito Rene or how, because he seemed always to be a part of our lives. Maybe through the Almendras Durano clan, maybe through the old Liberal Party networks. What I remember is the deep and abiding friendship of two extraordinary men born in extraordinary times. Lawyers of supreme skill and talent, they nevertheless thought that law was merely an instrument for change, that through land reform and social protection, they could somehow transform into a new society, the Philippines after the Second World War. Two provincianos, one Ilocos Norte, one from Cebu, determined to change the world indeed. But first, there was politics and the business of winning. In 1964, when my father, then Senator Marcos, determined to run for president, one of the first persons he asked to join him was then Governor of Cebu, Governor Espina. He flew to Cebu hoping to convince the governor and the Cebuano forces to join him and the Nacionalista Party. Tito Rene, as usual, agreed with enthusiasm and alacrity, said it was a good plan, it would probably work, and then profusely apologized that he couldn't do it just now. He had to consult his wife. So my father said, "Why? I thought you said yes." She saved me, Pining saved me from Magsaysay's plane. And she has a sixth sense. And she said she'd leave me if I didn't ask her first. So my dad said, okay, Rene, I understand. Imelda's just like that. We real men must obey our wives. And so they both dutifully got a helicopter, flew to Dumaguete, asked permission, won the election, and the rest is Philippine history. In the end, however, what bound these two remarkable men and sealed this lifelong friendship was nation building. Nation building as a literal belief in constructing roads, clearing, opening mountain passes, building in bricks and mortar what would be a new nation, the Philippines, in the wreckage of World War II. In 1968, Governor Espino was appointed concurrent Secretary of Public Works, Transportation, and Communication. Shortly thereafter, Tito Rene, with Mayors Durano, Calderon, and Cortez, went to Malacanang, purportedly to greet the President a happy birthday. And thus, exactly 51 years ago, September 18, 1968, the notion of the Mactan-Mandaue Bridge was born. Governor Secretary Espina declared, "We must unite Cebu." His Ilocano president retorted, "Hey, I have no budget, and the election is next year." And Tito Rene answered, "No problem. You will win in Cebu." My dad said, "Hambog naman ikaw, Rene. I have never won in Cebu." My father bewailed. "Well, you will now," said Governor Espina. And my father replied, "Then you can have your bridge, okay?" As luck would have it, my father went up against the proud son of Cebu City, Sering Osmeña Jr., and the election was dirty, long, and bitter. Nevertheless, true to his word, Governor Espina delivered Cebu, President Marcos trouncing Osmeña by a decent 38,000 plus votes in Cebu province. True, construction began on the Mactan-Mandaue Bridge almost immediately. Because, as he said, Tito Rene was right. My dad was wrong. You won, Rene. You can have your bridge now. And shortly, factories began to move to the other side of the channel. Jobs began to multiply. And Mandaue, that sleepy, soggy backwater, was declared a city in 1970. Thereafter, Mactan flourished, together with Lapu-Lapu, Consolacion, even the Camotes, and somehow Cebu City as well. By July 1973, the Mactan-Mandaue Bridge, uniting Cebu at last, as Governor and Senator Tito Rene Espina declared, was finally open. For me, for my mother, and the rest of my family. No matter the span and the grandeur of the bridges that followed across the Mactan Channel, they will never match the thrill, the excitement, the sheer and utter disbelief of that first bridge by Senator Rene Espina. And whatever that old truss bridge that is already there for us, no matter what that bridge is called, for us and for all those who remember these old stories, that will always be the Senator Rene Espina Bridge for good and all, forever and for all time. So many memories, so much affection and loyalty lost with a bygone era. With prayers to the Espina family from mine, pahuway sa kalinaw, gikan sa mapuslanon nimong kinabuhi, Tito Rene. Kuyog sa imong mga amigo sa langit, ug magampo mi sa Ginoo para nimo. Daghan salamat sa imong tanan.
The Honorable Franklin M. Drilon will now deliver his eulogy.
Mrs. Rofinita Pining de Leon Remulla Espino, Rafael Rene Marie, Jean Franco, Eric Miguel, members of the Espina family, Senate President Vicente Sotto III, my esteemed colleagues, His Excellency former President Joseph Estrada, ladies and gentlemen, a very pleasant good morning. Today, with profound sadness, we gather in this august chamber to mourn the passing of a colleague, former Senator Jesus Marino Rene Gandionco Espina. Today, with profound sadness, we honor Senator Rene Espina, who in his lifetime honored this august chamber as a public servant with unblemished integrity. I did not have the honor to serve in this chamber with Senator Rene, but I vividly recall his being constantly here in the Senate, sitting among us or in that VIP gallery to pay respects to this chamber on special occasions, such as the opening of Congress. I would always see him here. The observance of Senate anniversaries, he was always here. He was loyal to the institution. He accorded it his respect and highest esteem. Today, we can do no less. We join his beloved family and the whole nation in remembering his remarkable achievements and his unwavering commitment to serve his country. In his lifetime, Senator Rene wore many hats: a lawyer, a cabinet secretary, a senator, a governor.
the youngest administrator of the Social Security system at the age of 33, and a columnist of the Manila Bulletin later in his life. As a lawmaker, he will always be remembered as the principal author of the country's first anti-illegal drugs law, Republic Act 6425, otherwise known as the Drugs Act of 1972, the forerunner of Republic Act 9165, or the Comprehensive Dangerous Drugs Act of 2002, which our Senate President Vicente Sotto III has been pushing and shepherding through these halls. 47 years ago, Senator Espina had already identified the country's illegal drug problem, although it was still at its incipient stage, as an emerging threat to human security. In one of his Manila Bulletin columns, he publicly lamented the harmful effects of illegal drugs on the Filipino family and society. Rene Espina was also known as the road builder of Cebu. As Senator Imee Marcos said, he built the first Mandawi-Mactan Bridge and developed many major roads in Cebu. I am sure that in his later part of his life, he would wonder if he could have done something today because of the horrible traffic that we see in Cebu. To many who admired him from a distance, he can-do attitude in terms of developing the infrastructure in Cebu was inspiring. Rene Espina did not come from any of the powerful political clans in Cebu. His meteoric rise in the world of politics was due to his brilliance, dedication, hard work, and his big heart for public service. Even in the sunset years of his life, he saw the need for Filipinos to get their act together to achieve our development goals. In his November 2017 Manila Bulletin column, he called on the Filipinos to unite. He wrote, and I quote, "Our goal as a nation is unfinished. Let us therefore unite. Together we shall build that just, honest, and prosperous society." Today, I ask everyone to take to heart the brilliant and poignant words of Rene Espina. To the members of the Espina family, we offer our sincerest and deepest condolences. You are in our thoughts and in our prayers in this most difficult and sad time. Senator Rene Espina was a great Filipino whose life exemplified unstinting service to our beloved country. May his legacy continue to live in the hearts not only of his loved ones and people who have known him in his lifetime, but also in each and every Filipino. Farewell, Senator Rene Espina. Rest well in the arms of the Almighty Father. Daghang salamat sa imong serbisyo sa atong nasod.
The Secretary of the Senate will now read Senate Resolution number 12.
Resolution number 12, resolution expressing the profound sympathy and sincere condolence of the Senate of the Philippines on the death of former Senator Rene G. Espina. Whereas the Honorable Rene G. Espina, a distinguished public servant who had worked his country in various capacities, Senator, Governor of Cebu, Secretary of Public Works, Transportation and Communications, Administrator of the Social Security System, SSS, television host and newscaster, and newspaper columnist, passed away on September 13, 2019. Whereas a youth leader, scholar, and among the top notchers in the 1954 bar examinations, ninth place with a grade of 93.2%, he served the government with utmost dedication and commitment, always in search of excellence to uplift and improve the life of the Filipino people. Whereas the youngest to be appointed administrator and vice chairman of the SSS, he introduced the first computer system in government and worked doubly hard to ensure the viability and financial independence of the institution from government subsidy through increased income and membership coverage. Whereas, as governor of Cebu, he focused on programs and projects that improved infrastructure in the province, beautified and improved the barangays, and developed healthy water system in the locality, and was instrumental in the successful recovery of several province-owned real properties illegally donated by unauthorized officers. Whereas, for his outstanding performance and accomplishments as Chief Local Executive of Cebu Province, he was awarded the Most Outstanding Governor of the Philippines in 1968 and 1969. Whereas, it was under his watch as Secretary of Public Works, Transportation, and Communications that the Mactan-Mandawi Bridge was conceptualized in 1970, constructed and completed on July 4, 1973, for which he was called the builder, father, what is now known as the Sergio Osmeña Bridge. Whereas in 1969, he was elected senator, served as chairman of the Committee on Health and Rural Development, and was instrumental in the enactment of RA number 6425, otherwise known as the Dangerous Drugs Act of 1972, and the law establishing the Philippine Export and Foreign Loan Guarantee Corporation. And for his exemplary performance as a senator, he was voted as one of the most outstanding senators. Whereas a serious-minded person with uncompromising attitude and always mindful of the rule of law, he was actively involved not only in public service but also in civic work. Thus, he was conferred the Golden Rooster Award for his outstanding social work and various special awards for civic work. Whereas his passing away is a great loss not only to his bereaved family but to the nation as well. Now, therefore, be it resolved by the Senate of the Philippines to express, as it hereby expresses, its profound sympathy and sincere condolence on the death of former Senator Rene G. Espina. Resolved further that a copy of this resolution be furnished the bereaved family of the Honorable Rene G. Espina. Adopted.
The Senate President, together with the Senate Majority Leader, the Minority Leader, and all incumbent senators will now present Senate Resolution Number 12 to the family of the late Senator Rene G. Espina. The Honorable Vicente C. Sotto III, Senate President, will now deliver his eulogy.
Time and circumstance had determined early on that the late Senator Rene Espina and I would not be contemporaries. He was a member of the Senate of the 7th Congress, whose term was cut short following the declaration of martial law in 1972. At that time, the Senate President was Gil Puyat. Jose Roy was President pro tempore. Arturo Tolentino was the Majority Floor Leader. Gerardo Rojas was the Minority Floor Leader. The other senators who worked with him included Almendras, Antonino, Aquino Jr., Aitona, Benitez, Jokno, Ilarde, Calao, Lagumbay, Laurel, Maceda, Magsaysay, Mitra Jr., De Osmeñas, John Encherio Jr., Padilla, Pelaez, Perez, Salonga, Sumulong, Tamano, Tañada, and Tevez. They were all pillars of the politics of the 1970s. After close to 50 years, we fast forward to this generation of senators who look back to those historical times in the life of this august chamber and the nation, and of course included our dear friend Rene Espina. At the time Senator Espina was a senator, I was in another planet, in the world of sports, music, and entertainment. The most psychic fortune teller then could not have predicted that I would be Senate President when the remains of the late great Senator Espina's mortal remains would be honored in necrological services as we do today in the Senate. But there was something about Senator Rene Espina that would resonate with my origins and advocacies. That he was a Cebuano immediately located him as my kababayan. For my lolo, Senator Vicente Sotto, of course, hails from Cebu. We are family friends. I am the godfather of Eric, and that he was the author and sponsor of the Dangerous Drugs Act of 1972, again placed him as a co-warrior in the fight against illegal drugs. The same law that I used to initiate an illegal drugs campaign, anti-illegal drugs campaign during my stint as Vice Mayor of Quezon City from 1988 to 1992. And inspired us for the Comprehensive Dangerous Drugs Act of 2002. And on a personal note, may I acknowledge that I had the privilege of campaigning with my godson, Eric, in many political sorties, and he impressed me with his campaign skills and strategies, which he undoubtedly took after his father. It has been said that the best speech delivered in services such as we have today do not emanate from the speakers, but from the deed of the person being honored. And that speech says that we must make the most out of our lives, for we know that when the curtain falls on our time here on earth, it is a speech that reminds us to preserve our souls for the transition from physical existence to the spiritual. And the late Senator Rene Espina had demonstrated to us that a life in public service is a life well lived. From his stint at the SSS to leading the province of Cebu as governor, to becoming Secretary of Public Works, Transportation, and Communications, and then being elected as senator. So on behalf of the Philippine Senate, I salute the Honorable Rene Espina for living that humble and simple life of a public servant away from the funfair of self-praise and the selling of dreams, but simply finding comfort in the thought that here was a man who lived so that his countrymen may enjoy the benefits of his labor. Paalam, Rene Espina.
On behalf of the family of the late Senator Rene G. Espina, Mr. Eric Miguel R. Espina will deliver the response.
Senate President Vicente Sotto III, distinguished members, Senators of the Republic of the Philippines, Manong Johnny, salamat po. Your Excellency, President Joseph Ejercito Estrada, salamat sa inyong lahat. Maraming salamat. The predestination of God's, our Creator's, and Jesus Christ's handiwork in the life of my father, as you have heard, has been most eminent. Even in his last breaths, our prayers were being heard. He passed away peacefully and painlessly. It was a kind of passing where our own priest, family priest, would say, I would like to die like him. As you all know, every political family has its own mini Senate in the house. And often, the dining table becomes the session hall. And my father would allow democracy in our house. Petitions, bills, if you will, discourses, and heated debates. But when the siblings finally had to get married, moved to different houses, we were reduced to committee hearings. When my father decided to go back to Cebu, the discussions became far and in between, but they still continued. The conversations in the family remained until the time when my father had to undergo dialysis treatment. I recall visiting Manong Johnny in his house, and he asked me, how is your father doing? And I said, Manong, mortality is a certainty. And based on this, when I returned to Cebu, it was time to refocus our conversations with my father. And I was talking about introducing him to the Bible. Don't misunderstand, my father was a highly religious man. He was taking communion 3 times a week, of course, with my mother. But this belonged to a generation that unencouraged the reading of the Bible motu proprio. Sons, the advice and counsel of priestly guidance. So it was my duty as a good son to present to him the Bible. My dilemma was, how do I present this to a legal mind? At that, maintain his interest at 89 years old. So I had to approach this in a very scholarly manner. I said, this was part of our discussions. I said, Dad, did you ever wonder why the Bible said the world was created in 4 days? Because this is the usual debates. And I made the Bible answer it, and he read it. The last discussions we had, in order to really get him interested, was I said, Dad, do you know how many people saw Jesus Christ resurrected? That will be our topic tomorrow. So the next day, moved. I visited his house, knocked, opened, I kissed him. I said, do you remember what our agenda is today? And he said, the apostles and the disciples saw Jesus Christ alive. I said, that is true. But do you want to know the exact number? He was very emphatic and said, yes, I want to know how many witnesses. His legal mind kicked in. And so I got the body of evidence, the love letter of our Creator to man, and said, I want you to read it. And in the verses it stated, at least 500 people saw Jesus Christ alive. And he was most happy with the weight of evidence. It was preponderant, so to speak. Well, if you are going to ask me what was his last wish, so to speak, he said, please make sure I am dead when you put me inside the coffin. My father developed later a sense of claustrophobia. And I said, Dad, you're listening to the stories of yore, where people are buried alive. Today we have morticians and mortuary who will allay your fears. But levity aside, at a young and impressionable age, I asked my father, Dad, did you plan on becoming a politician or a hero? A philosophical question. And he looked at me, thought for a few moments, and said, I never planned on either. And then I said, because in my researches, those who want to be heroes end up being exiled, arrested, charged, imprisoned, worst, executed. Family is impoverished, and the worst of all, people who love their country so dearly do not become presidents because they would prefer to be heroes. Anyway, I think the best way to describe my father is to borrow from Polonius to Hamlet. And I quote, this above all, to thyself be true, and it shall follow, the day, the night, thou canst be false to any man. Christian morality and principles was not a punchline for my mother. It was the backbone of his life as part of his odyssey with conscience. In his public life, more so in his private life, and his dealings with the humanity of his political constituency. And my family knew this. Sirs, ladies and gentlemen, my father loved this institution. He loved this institution. And let me amend myself, nay, he cherished and honored the Philippine Senate. Unconfined to the current chorus that it is the last bastion of Philippine democracy. As he has often told me, it must be akin to an altar, a church for the last, the least, and the lost of our people, where they can bear their petitions long on their shoulders, genuflected before several offices and various representations, frustrated as they are, urgent as the need may be, with their bitten whispers. But they can be guaranteed that here in the Senate, they don't only have one, they don't have only two, nor three, but 24 fathers of the Republic. Further, he said that this institution protect and defend one of its core values in Philippine historiography as being the best institution to train, to prune, to expose future presidents and vice presidents of this country, unlimited to the next 6 years, but dedicated to that great proposition of the next 100 years of the existence of this republic. And finally, he prayed that this institution be a repository of the best virtues in public governance, to provide the alternative national and moral agenda, if and when required, a separate interpretation of the state of the nation. And with this, in behalf of the Espina family, our matriarch here, Mrs. Rofinita Remolyo Espina, the only love of my father. Nagtanan nito sila nung 19 years old. Nung nakita ng tatay ko, nag-i-enroll. Sabi niya, ito ang aasawahin ko. Kaya nagtanan after 1 year. To my brothers, elder brothers, my siblings, Mary and Jean, to my nephews, my nieces, my wife, and all the relatives who took the time to be here, we extend our deepest gratitude to all of you and to the Philippine Senate. Especially to Senate President Vicente Sotto III, Senate Minority Leader Franklin Drilon, Senators Imee Marcos, and of course all the senators who took a time to be here. Maraming salamat sa inyo lahat at huwag po nating kalilimutan. Of course, Senate President Juan Ponce Enrile. And Your Excellency, Ninong, marami pong salamat, President Joseph Estrada. Our thanks also to the Senate workers, especially to Executive Director for External Affairs, Diana Cruz. Bayad na ako sa iyo. And our thanks extend to everyone, friends, workers, part of the supporters, and even Mrs. Celia Diaz-Laurel is here, who took a slice of their life and spent it with us to condole. To those who offered masses, prayers, flowers, texts, hindi ba namin kayo maabot? Nagpapasalamat kami. At higit sa lahat, ang sambayanang Pilipino at ang Diyos na nagbigay puwang sa isang mabait na ama, matinong senador na makapagpanigbihan sa ating bansa. And so, with your indulgence, Mr. Senate President, my father, Senator Rene Espina, wishes to be excused, as this will mark his last attendance to the roll call of this august body. He will join his colleagues in the 7th Congress, the 7th Senate, and with your indulgence, former Senate President Gil Puyat, Emmanuel Pelaez, Arturo Tolentino, Jovito Salonga, Ambrosio Padilla, Jose Jokno, Dominador Aitona, CPA number 1, and Bartap Notcher, Benigno Aquino, Salvador Laurel, etc., etc., etc. The illumined stars that dotted and brightened the political constellation of our republic. To all of you, my father bids you all Godspeed and his final and faint goodbye.
This necrological service is hereby declared closed.
The public may now view the remains of the late Senator Rene G. Espina. May we invite the family and friends, relatives of the late Senator Rene G. Espina to proceed to the Recto Laurel Room for lunch. May we also request the senators to join the family of the late Senator Rene G. Espina for lunch. Once again, may we invite the family, relatives, and friends of the late Senator Rene G. Espina for lunch at the Recto Laurel Room. May we also invite the senators to join the family of the late senator.